Hey Reddit, this is Geodesy here. This is the first in what will hopefully be a series of videos. We put a post in the subreddit here just yesterday, I think, kind of asking for some input on the site and what kind of things people would like to see. And one of the things that people expressed interest in were kind of some original videos, some original reviews, overviews, things like that were produced right here on Reddit. By some of our moderators and other members that have anything to volunteer. So I thought I would take a first stab at putting a video up. Maybe we can get this linked in the sidebar and we can make this a thing. We answer a lot of questions on the subreddit, mostly people looking for lights and recommendations, and one thing that comes up a lot is kind of an EDC type light, maybe a 2-cell or an 18650 light. And in my mind, the first thing that I think of is what we'll call a P60 compatible light. So I have, as you see in front of you here, several P60 style lights that I have. By P60 we mean that it takes a drop-in module. So, and a P60, specifically a P60 compatible drop-in module. You'll hear that, I think that nomenclature may have originally come from Surefire, though I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong. And this, you know, the kind of the benchmark P60 host was the Surefire 6P. I don't have a 6P handy, actually. The 6P was the 2-cell Surefire, but I do have a 9P, a Surefire 9P. This is just the 3-cell version of the 2-cell light. Really the only difference is the length. It's you know, a little bit longer, as you can see, than another comparable 2-cell light. But otherwise it's the same thing. So I'll kind of use this as my stand-in and as my go-to comparable light for this little video here. I have also a Surefire G3, the Nitrolon, which is kind of the hard plastic version of the 6P. I have a Solar Force L2P, this is the older version L2P. They've since come out with a new one that now has, I think, a forward clicky and maybe a couple of other modifications. But in general, it's the offering from Solar Force. That's the Type 3 hard anodized, kind of the little bit higher end model from them. I have a G2, which is the 2-cell version of Surefire's Nitrolon plastic light, and then the Malkov MD2, which is Malkov's kind of entry into the P60 arena. We'll talk about all these a little bit more. My intention here is to go over not just each of these lights, but also just kind of the P60 format in general, just so people have an idea of what it means to get a light and a drop-in, rather than buying a package light that comes with a light engine that you can't remove or change. I'm not going to call this a review. This is absolutely not a review. I think that term gets thrown around a little bit loosely, and I want to avoid that. I'm just going to do an overview, we'll call it, of some P60 lights. I will give you some impressions and some input, but, you know, of course, each of you are you know, you need to make your own decision about what you're looking for, and in particular things that you think are, you know, positives and negatives in terms of what you're looking for in a light. So, anyway, when I say a drop-in, what do I mean by that? Well, this, I'll show you here. This is a lamp module. This is the 9-volt, so it actually would have come out of a 3-cell light like this. But this is the drop-in module that originally comes with a Surefire light. And you can see when I take the head off here, I can drop it right in and it will actually light up with the cells that I have in here. Take this out for now. Sorry, should have had something prepared with it, not all the way threaded in. There we go. So you would just drop it right in the head, and you'll see inside the light there's a little shoulder where the larger outer spring connects, and then the positive terminal of the battery connects to this inner spring here, the smaller spring, and you know, you screw it back together and it lights up. Puts out pretty decent light. Surefire's, you know, these original kind of pills here are pretty shock-proof. I mean, you see they've got them epoxied, and they've got this little plastic rubber goodie that the spring mounts to. It's a pretty hardy little unit. Of course, you know, it's still just an incandescent bulb, and that's a lot of what we do here is we try to replace incandescent bulbs with LEDs because we get more output, more efficiency, they're a little bit more rugged, things like that. So this is what it all started from, and this is where the idea of the P60 drop-in came about, was something to replace this. So I have here an example of one of those drop-ins. This is from Solar Force. Looks like this is a XPG R5 single mode. So, you know, when you're talking about the anatomy of a drop-in, you've got a few things to consider. You've got the pill, and I think I have one here because that one I couldn't unscrew earlier. Oop, there's one. So the pill is the LED, which you'll see there's the little, oh, I can't get it to focus. Come on. In any case, the LED is mounted to the board. The board, you know, the little PCB there has a driver circuit behind it, an electronic driver circuit that is regulated. In the case of most LED lights, it allows it to kind of output a constant output despite the battery level, the level of charge or energy remaining in the battery. And then you've got the reflector, which in this case screws onto the pill. You'll see that some of the ones I have are, you can't take them apart like this, but if you want to replace, in this case, an orange or orange peel reflector would be kind of a texturized reflector that gives you a little bit better flood, a little better spill. This one happens to be a smooth reflector, so a little bit better throw. But you can swap out the reflectors if you want in some cases, and you'll find that in general a lot of these things are common thread sizes, common thread pitches, so they thread right onto each other. But that's the P60 drop, and this is kind of just the general what it would look like across the board. Now, I also have, a lot of you have heard me talk about nail bender drop-ins before. So nail bender is a flashlight maker, or at least a drop-in maker, who spends a lot of time on candle power forums and creates some relatively high quality drop-ins. You'll see the anatomy is very similar. It's kind of got this brass pill with the spring, and then a nice reflector that was designed specifically for, you know, for the various applications. He has XPGs and XPEs and XREs and of course the XML. But these are put together pretty well, and actually you can pay a little bit of extra money and he will epoxy coat and fill in around all the electronics to give you a little bit more shock resistance, a little bit of protection against dirt and moisture and other things that might get in your drop-in. But in general, this is it. This is really this is the guts of the light. You don't need anything other than this, beyond, of course, batteries to power it and a hose to put it in. You saw me pull one earlier out of this 9P. This one looks a little bit different. This is a Malkoff drop-in. In particular, this is an M91W, the warm version of his XML drop-in. And you'll see that it's done a little bit differently. Instead of an external spring, he actually makes contact with the shoulder and the light using the outer brass part of the heatsink here. And that's what you notice a little bit different about this. This whole thing is solid brass. Well, not solid, obviously it's filled with the electronics and it's been potted again with, you know, thermal epoxy. But the whole thing is, you can't take it apart. It's all one solid piece, which is good and bad. I mean, if you wanted to modify it somehow, you couldn't do that. On the other hand, the fact that it's a solid piece that's been all epoxy together makes it pretty tough, and that's kind of what Malkoff has a reputation for, is having very tough modules. Also, the brass, the heavy brass, kind of provides a little bit of additional heat sinking. You'll see it doesn't work quite as well in the Surefire lights. I mean, this was designed to be a drop-in replacement for the Surefire module in Surefire lights. I think Gene Malkoff actually started making these before he made his own light to put them in. But you'll see it just drops in there. It sits kind of firmly, and then you put in your top. There we go. Put your bezel on, screw it on, and it would work. Now the difference is that it doesn't have that outer spring, so you don't get that big kind of resistance when you're screwing down the head, but it sits in there rather nicely, and it does make contact. This brass piece does make contact with the aluminum inner part of the head here, and that's where your heat will escape from. I'll talk a little bit more about the way that the Malkoff drop-in fits in the Malkoff light later. But in general, we talk about the stuff being Lego-able, you know, Lego as in the blocks you use to build things because they can attach to each other. So this is the head off a Solar Force light. This is very similar to this here, the L2P. This came from a Solar Force L2, and I can screw it right on the Surefire body. It threads on perfectly. It actually threads on very smoothly. And other than maybe a little bit of difference in color in the anodizing, you couldn't tell that this wasn't factory, unless of course you knew that it was a Solar Force head. So all of these things, with some exception, and I'll talk about that a little bit, are Legoable. It's a tough word. Okay, put the 9P back down here. Just put it back in our stack for height comparison. I want to mention that with these, the Nitrolon Surefires, you sometimes will struggle with fitting your your drop-in inside the head. And though it's supposed to be just an absolute replacement, swap-in replacement for their aluminum lights, the Nitrolon lights are a little bit different. They're put together a little bit differently, so occasionally you might have to clip the spring or stretch the spring or something to fit it inside the head. And in particular, I struggle using the Malkoff modules because, you know, they're as long as they're going to be. You can't modify them at all. There's no stretching the spring out because there's no outer spring. But in every case that I've experienced, you will be able to tighten the head around the O-ring and get a good seal. So I'm not worried about that, but just occasionally you might have a little gap in between the head here, the head and the shoulder of the rest of the light that, you know, may not be aesthetically pleasing, but it shouldn't cause any problem with functionality as long as that O-ring is engaged. Something I should have mentioned earlier, but the switch style on this, the 9P, and it's the same on the 6P style lights. This is a Surefire Z41 tail cap. You can see that there. I'm getting a very good focus, but the way this tail cap works, it does have a switch on the butt here. So to activate the light, you can push the switch in, and it will turn the light off and on. It's a momentary switch, meaning it only lights up as you have it held down. As soon as you let up, the light turns off. If you twist the switch on, you can also lock the switch on, and it will keep the light on constantly. If you back it off a half turn, it's anodized on the inside, so it won't make, it's not electrically conductive, and it won't turn the light, it just turns the light off, basically. That is kind of the old, I'll call it old school style Surefire Z41 tail cap. A lot of guys that get these lights and end up making modifications to them, it's one of the first things they do is to put a clicky switch in it. So just to give you an example, I have this Surefire G2 here that I've got a clicky switch kit and put it in. That allows you, I mean, you can't turn the light on by screwing it down. It won't work that way anymore because you're replacing the guts. What you're doing instead is you just get a click. Now this is a McClicky kit from Don McLeish, the guy who designed a lot of other flashlight parts that, you know, I'll talk about here and also that you can see around. He's a great flashlight maker himself. But the McClicky has a momentary option, so if you just partial press it down, it will come on. But if you fully click it on, it stays lit up. And that's kind of the go-to now, kind of the standard tail cap switch that you'll see on a lot of different lights. One difference is some of the lights have what we call a reverse clicky instead of a forward clicky. So instead of on a forward clicky like this where you would push it forward and it's momentary on, with a reverse clicky like on this older version Solar Force, you have to fully click it on before the light comes on. And then when you let it up, it will light up, and you have to fully click it off again. To change modes, which you can do, some of these drivers have multiple modes. The way you activate that is by partially pressing the light, just a small press, and that will click through the different modes if the driver has multiple modes to it. This one doesn't. This is a single mode, actually. So that's a little bit of a switch difference. The Malkoff here has a forward clicky switch. It actually comes from Malkoff when you order it. Comes with the McClicky. It doesn't require any modification to get that McClicky in there, which is pretty nice. So some other differences, just some look at maybe the materials, kind of things that you see from the outside when you look at the lights. The Surefire is a very hefty light. It's got very thick walls. I have a pair of calipers here. I intended on maybe taking a look at the thickness, the wall thickness here. When I measure the wall thickness, I'm getting about, looks like 4.17 millimeters on the wall. That's pretty thick, and I'll explain in a second, you know, why the difference is so great, as you'll see. With an L2P, this is the Solar Force here, getting about 3.28 millimeters on the wall. And then the Malkoff, getting 3.56 millimeters.